But it's now the Vim questions, so we're ready to switch if you want.
Ja. Ja, cool. Good. Ja,
By the way, thank you to our translators. Let's give them a hand. Thank you very much. Woo. Thanks, Mark. Let's go to this page now. Vim questions for the congregation. This will work out great, John. This break in 15 minutes. We'll just be right. Are you ready? I'm ready. Hi, nice to meet you. Vim questions for the congregation. In congregation, I'm asking you to be as honest with yourself as you would want your pastor to be honest with himself or herself. Do you as a congregation have the vision to become a healthy missional church? In other words, do we understand the message and mission of Jesus? Are we pure on the gospel? Do we understand if or what our unique approach is to that question? Do we understand how to communicate the vision with a sense of clarity and urgency? Do we understand how to help people buy into the vision? Do we, as a congregation, have the intention or the desire to become a healthy missional church? In other words, are we willing to come before God with a sense of brokenness and desperation? Are we willing to count the cost and pay the price? Are we willing to take an honest look at ourselves? Are we willing to take responsibility for our own vitality? Are we willing to follow the Spirit wherever the Spirit leads? Are we as a congregation willing to experience the fulfillment and the joy and exhilaration of becoming a healthy missional church? Are we willing to persevere through the growing pains of becoming a healthy missional church? Next, do we have the means or the resources to become a healthy missional church? In other words, what's our asset base in terms of people resources, spiritual resources, financial resources, community resources, conference or denominational resources? In combination, do we believe these provide a sufficient platform for moving forward? Now here's where we say in America, where the rubber meets the road. The tire meets the road. This is the Vim decision point for the congregation. Therefore, with God's help and grace, we will, 1, remain the same and continue on our current trajectory. And that's a negative response that says, we aren't going to change at all. Thank you for coming. Goodbye. And some churches say that to me. Or we will resolve to move forward and become a healthy missional church. Or we recognize that through this process, it might be best to think about God-honoring ways to celebrate and conclude our ministry. Those are the Vim decision points for every congregation. Now let's turn the tables and ask Pastor the Vim questions. And pastors, I want to ask you to be as honest with yourself as you would want your congregation to be as honest with themselves. By the way, congregation, these are not questions that I want you to hold over your pastor like, we want to know your answers to these in 35 days. That's not the spirit of these questions. This is about helping each other to become healthy and missional. Here are the Vim questions for the pastor. Do I, as a pastor, have the vision to lead this church to become a healthy missional church? In other words, do I have an abiding sense of God's call for this place at this time? Do I have some sense of direction of where the church needs to go? Do I, as a pastor, have the intention or the desire to lead this congregation to become a healthy missional church? In other words, am I prepared to work hard, invest in the people, and be patient? Am I willing to be in it for the long haul, the long term? Am I at peace that this is still a conducive environment or a healthy environment for my family? Am I willing to come before God with a sense of my own brokenness and desperation? Am I willing to count the cost and pay the price? Am I willing to take an honest look at myself? Do I, as a pastor, have the means or the resources to lead this congregation to become a healthy missional church? In other words, do I have the right gift mix to help advance the ministry? Do I have a sense that this is still a good fit for me? Do I have credibility so the people will follow? And do I have love for these people? Now here's the VIM decision point for the pastor. Therefore, with God's help and grace, I will, 1, lead the change or lead vitality and be willing and able to change myself. This is all with God's help, mind you. Or prepare the way for another pastor to lead the church, and I move on and seek a new place for ministry. Take 5 minutes around your tables and talk about these questions. What do you think about them? What do you feel about them? What do you like? What don't you like? You've got 5 minutes. So, what do you think about these questions? Do you like them? Do you not like them? What do you think about them?
You ask big questions.
Jesus asked a lot of questions.
Yes, but you give the people time to ask.
He did. I gave you 15 minutes instead of 5. To me, these questions are sobering. They're serious.
Yes.
And they get to the heart of the matter. So, what happens when the vim level of the congregation exceeds the vim level of the pastor? What happens?
There's a gap.
Yes, there's a gap.
Yes.
So, paint a few scenarios. What happens in that situation? When the vim level of the congregation exceeds the vim level of the pastor, what happens?
The pastor becomes the limiting factor for the church stability.
That's right. The pastor becomes the limiting factor for the church. And sometimes the church may ask their pastor to leave. Right? I mean, we're just being honest at Veritas. In a civil, compassionate, Christ-honoring way. But the best thing for a congregation to do is not to ask their pastor to leave, but to get under their pastor and help their pastor grow through coaching, through training, through some help, where the congregation can actually help their pastor grow in levels of vision, intention, and means. What happens when the vim level of the pastor exceeds the vim level of the congregation? Now what happens? What's that?
Give it hard work for the pastor.
It is hard work for the pastor, because the pastor can get under the congregation and raise the vim level of the congregation. Or the pastor may get tired and leave. because he says or she says, these people aren't willing to grow in their vision, intention, and needs. And I've tried, but they aren't willing to grow. So I'm going to leave to another congregation, or I'm going to go plant a church or something like this. The key is for the pastor to come underneath the congregation and help their vision and intention and needs to grow. So we're helping each other grow along the way. And if it doesn't work out in a couple of years, well, hey, at least we helped our pastor, or the pastor helped the congregation as best as they could. You don't want to become known as a clergy-killing congregation. So you want to do everything you can to help your pastor grow in Vim. And pastor, you don't want to be known as a congregation-killing pastor. So you want to do everything you can to help your current congregation grow with vision, intentionality, and means. So we grow together. This is what I encourage you to do first. And give it your best shot. And everything that you've got. And I believe God will honor that. Guess what time it is? Coffee time. Hey, did you enjoy this afternoon? I did. And let's come back in about a half